Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome to the stage the 2018 Northern Region Champion of Entrepreneurship, Sarina Russo, for the Sarina Russo Group. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I didn't realise we had so much in common because you bought your first company for $600 and once upon a time I had $600. But
no, I didn't buy it. I
created it. And what I didn't do is then create a company that became a multi-million-dollar business. And the Sarina Russo Job Access is, as we heard, the largest Australian-owned private sector job provider. It's quite a journey. You talk about transformation in the video. You see yourself when you started, the transformation of you to this point. What's that journey been?
Oh, my transformation in the last 39 years.
Yeah.
Well, it's speechless really, because this week is exactly 39 years since I started, and I was a fired legal secretary, and there are very, very few people who really believed in my vision. And I just want to acknowledge my brother-in-law, Jerry Panisi. Jerry, could you please stand? He's the one that said, just do it. So thank you, Jerry. And being a fired legal secretary and not being able to have the confidence from your school at All Hallows, who told me that I'd never make it to grade 12, and now I understand I'm in the Hall of Fame in business. Entrepreneurship was not a word. It was more about, science and being a doctor or being a teacher or being a lawyer. And I was defined as not having the capability to get into grade 12 and make it to university. I'd like to acknowledge Paul Greenfield, who's now on my board of Russo Business School. Paul, could you please stand? Who was a former Vice Chancellor of UQ. I also want to acknowledge Kathleen Newcomb, who was my competitor for Lorraine Martin for some 28 years. Kathleen, could you please stand? And I also want to acknowledge the godfather, Kevin Eyre, who came out of a public service position because they changed the employment sector, and rather than having CES, we had what is called Job Network. I didn't understand what that was, but Kevin Eyre backed himself, and he was the godfather of the employment side of our business. I'd like to acknowledge Kevin Eyre. And then we've got someone like Diane Fletcher, who had the news to tell me in 2009 that I had failed my tender, that I had to close down all our offices in Queensland, that I had to fire 200 staff in 2009, and she was then the state manager of Queensland of the Department of Employment, and I just couldn't believe the news under the Rudd government that I would be removed out of something that I loved and be left with 3 offices and be told that I was going to had to fire 200 staff. And now Diane is my CEO of Job Active. Please acknowledge Diane. I never, ever, ever fired one person in 2009. I backed myself, and Kevin Eyre took me to a place called the Midlands in Coventry in 2009, and what we lost, something like millions of dollars in contract work, we won in the Midlands, and we made an impact. And we actually had Prince Andrew acknowledge us in the Midlands. We changed over 17,000 of people's lives in places like Coventry. So I want to acknowledge all my team. Can they please all stand? I'd like all my team to please stand. Just my 3 tables. I wanted to fill this room, but I wasn't allowed to.
Bravo.
And I want to acknowledge Dr. Kondos, who kept my mother alive with me to find the odds in chemistry and science. Please, Dr. Leon Kondos. He worked with me where my mother farewelled me and farewelled us at 102, 4 months, 4 weeks and 4 days. Let's acknowledge Dr. Kondos.
Do you ever feel like going back to your old school and going,
Not at all.
No, all right.
You see, I really believe that success is all about not when things are going great, and by joy, everything's going so well. You know, unpredictability is the norm. Diversity is the norm. You know, today we can't get enough of Indigenous job seekers. Everyone wants to have a certain proportion of Indigenous job seekers. We can't get enough. So the world has shifted. Today you don't have to be married, single, whatever you choose, you know, marriage equality. It's all now very, very much the norm. So we have to be able to manage the norm and make sure that we know what it is that we want and what our values are of today, and stand for your values.
Just finally and quickly, you support a lot of initiatives when it comes to particularly female entrepreneurs and the advancement of that. Tell us a little bit about that process.
Well, you know, today we don't only just back women, because we need also the men in our lives. I think as a group, we are very dynamic as a remarkable individual, whether you're a female or a male. I look at what we've achieved as remarkable human beings. You know, someone like Buzz Aldrin who landed on the moon. I mean, there's no such thing today as impossible. Today, we can make anything impossible. And I'm so privileged, and I thank Ernst & Young, Ian Burgess, who gave me the privilege to sit me down and say, the finalists, the winners of the previous Champion Entrepreneurship Award have nominated you this year. Ian, thank you for having the courage to come up to my office and be able to give me this most extraordinary award. I will hold it. I do not take it for granted. I thank all my community. I thank Queensland. I thank Northern Territory. And I also thank my Premier, Anastasia, who again defied the odds and is one of the most successful premiers we have in 2018. Thank you.
Sarina Russo, ladies and gentlemen, the 2018 Northern Region Champion of Entrepreneurship. Congratulations.